Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, to the world's most inconsistently consistent podcast, Name Pending. Today, I have my good friend and teacher, Mr. Steve. How you been, dude?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it is a genuine pleasure to have you on the podcast. Like you were one of the top lists I wanted to have since I
Oh my
started doing
gosh.
it like a year. No, that's no joke, really.
Well, this
First
will be
time
exciting then.
I decided that I think when the first time I met you, or one of the first times I met you, when I came into your office to grab something for you from you for Mrs. Dino, and there was some student having a complete and total meltdown in your chair, like screaming and like having a really bad day, and you just
Yeah.
completely ignored them at all, and we're like, yeah, no, just come in, take a seat. I'll give you what you need in just a second. At that moment, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I get it.
That sounds about right. Honestly, it sounds like every day at Roosevelt. There's someone having a meltdown in
You are
Mr.
not far
Steve
off.
or Dr. Dino's office.
You are not far off. So how is teaching been going with COVID? You are the choir director at Roosevelt for a couple different choirs, right?
Yeah, a number of different choirs, but that seems almost pointless at this point to say, only because none of the choirs are meeting.
Right.
But a number of choirs and a lot of great things happening in the normal year between Bridges to Harmony, the gospel choir, the chamber choir, JV show choir, and the bass clef choir. Usually have a great time. This year is kind of different, having to convert everything to an online format is not the easiest, and it also is not as fun
Fun? Yeah.
as doing regular performances. Now we have found quite a bit of success doing it online. We've been able to focus primarily on how music connects people and how music
Right.
makes people feel, and the history behind a number of genres, and a lot of the stuff that we don't necessarily get to do during the school year because we have so many performances all the time, and so we don't necessarily get that opportunity
Oh yeah. I
to
hadn't thought of that. The fact that
yeah.
you haven't been able to focus on the more academic, like here's the emotional impact of it, than the because you're doing so many performances.
Right, and I don't think it's intentional that we have a higher ratio of performance to information, but this has been a great year to give students a bit of a stronger foundation. Our students who will be continuing in the program next year and the years beyond. I'm grateful that this year has been able to give them an opportunity to dive deep into a number of different genres, to dive deep within classical music in a way that they may not have done before,
Right.
or musical theater, or pop, or country, rock, jazz, R&B, blues, gospel. We're covering it all, and it's really great to be able to do it. Still not as fun.
Right. Well, I guess in that way, it's like a whole new frontier, the COVID teaching things.
Oh yeah.
It's exciting.
Oh yeah.
Is that something you look for all the time, like even when listening to normal music, like the emotional impact? And are you thinking about the history when you're jamming out to like Chet Baker or whatever?
Not really. uh, it's one of those things that, like, once you learn it, you don't necessarily have to actively think about it.
Right.
It just kind of has to be there, I think. And as long as it is in the back of your mind, it kind of stays a part of you. But frankly, when I'm just casually listening to music, I'm not thinking, wow, this is just the most deep song I've ever heard, or this is the most incredible composition, written in the 1960s, or this and that. But I also definitely do that sometimes, so it's not completely
Right.
like
Right.
nothing.
Right.
Occasionally I'll be like, oh wow, that's a really fun song, or wow, that really is it. That is a defining moment of this genre, or something like that. But if I'm really just jamming out, if I'm just casually listening to music, I don't necessarily always have on an analytical brain. I think sometimes that could take away a little bit of the enjoyment. And I had to learn that early on. I used to go to concerts, and I was always very critical as a child, and I still am. I think it makes me a successful
Yeah.
conductor because I'm so critical of everything. Never pleased. But I would go to concerts, and I would judge these concerts. I would listen to the Cleveland Orchestra as an elementary school student and wonder, why are the violins so loud?
I remember
You know,
we we sat together at a certain unnamed high school concert once, and they were doing the the junior varsity something or other performance where it was a lot of like amateur Irish step dancing, and you had the most interesting look on your face I think I've ever seen in my life.
yeah, I try not to make it obvious. I can't hide it sometimes. I don't know. Sometimes it's just there.
So you'd say you'd have that creative like brain on most of the time then, and then only when you're listening to concerts the analytics get kicked up to the nth degree.
Well, yeah, well, and I try not to though because it kind of takes away the enjoyment.
Mm.
And I try not to always criticize or critique or analyze something happening, but it just happens. It just happens that way. But I've done it less and less, and I've had to be really intentional about that over the years, especially becoming an instructor, because nothing is more inappropriate um, than being too harsh at the wrong time.
Right, right.
So that's just something that I have to think about often, as an educator now, as a performer, as a professional in the field. I have to be a little bit more on my p's and q's, as they say.
Well, I'd say you've gotten very good at it because you've definitely shared stories of you in college about like your interpersonal reactions, about like how critical you were then, and I'd say you've made leaps and bounds besides your old comparative self to now.
It is shocking sometimes. I've gone back to watch performances of myself, and from college and things, and even a little bit before then, and I'll look, or I'll make a face in the performance, and I'm like, oh God, oh no, how dare I do that? And a lot of people don't necessarily notice it all the time, but it's funny now. On the other side of it, but not necessarily something that a conductor is pleased to see.
Right, right. So when I was growing up playing cello and piano, certain um, musicians would be really would be the people for me. Like I listened to a lot of Emmanuel Acts and Yo-Yo Ma and like the Cello Brothers, people in the sphere, but also like smaller underground individuals. When starting your singing career, both teaching and otherwise, did you have those specific people in mind, or was it more just this is my thing that I really enjoy doing?
Oh, that's a great question. I kind of consider myself more of a conductor than a performer, a little
Mm.
bit more of a teacher, um, than than a conductor. Um, and I have definitely, from when I was a young age, have always found joy in leading, which is strange. But even as a child, I would lead imaginary choirs, and have imaginary church and have imaginary classroom. And my parents, they just let us do it. And my younger sister was always involved in some way. I would always make her be a fake church member or a fake student. I'd like make up
Yeah,
homework
no,
and
I
assignments.
do the same thing for my little sister for sure.
Yeah. It's always fun to have that relationship with a younger sibling.
I'd agree.
Um,
Yeah.
and then even when I was, oh gosh, was I in first or second grade? I My mother was the head of a summer program at a daycare, preschool place, and in that summer camp, I did or wanted to create a performance of The Wizard of Oz, and as a child, I literally organized the the campers to do a Wizard of Oz performance.
In first
Um,
grade? That is
yeah.
young, Mr. Steve.
And I like directed it. We had music. I did choreography. I was doing all of these things. And then, according to my mother, I stormed off one day and never returned to the production because I was so angry. Um, and she told me this story recently, like a couple weeks ago. And uh, I could not. I kind of remember it. I remember like very small snippets of that. But she said, "Yeah, you just boss people around. You've always kind of just
Damn. All
taken
right.
charge, and led people, no matter how old you were." She said it was always funny because you were always the smallest one, and always one of the youngest, and you were always bossing big people around.
That's
um,
hilarious.
and so I think that kind of stuck with me over the years, in terms of being a leader. And so I kind of think about that differently, um, than my specific musical route, because I never wanted to be a singer or a pianist or anything like that. Even though I participated in boys choir for a number of years, even though I
All right.
played piano, I learned violin, I played drums. It was kind of just a musical experience. But then leadership kind of was the big drive, and leadership in music often leads to being the teacher or the conductor, whatever that looks like. And there were a number of people um, that I kind of emulated for a number of years, because that's just who I was around by. Boys choir directors, the Cleveland Boys Choir. I had two great conductors, Dr. Foley and Mrs. Foley. They were really great. They pretty much led me on the path that I'm on now. I truly attribute a lot of this to them, because they pushed me. When I was in, I think, second grade, I auditioned for this boys choir. I was in the training choir for a couple months. Then they pushed me on to the intermediate chorus, and then a couple weeks after that, they pushed me on to the touring choir. In third grade, I didn't know anyone in the touring choir because I was the youngest one, because that was usually reserved for fourth through eighth graders, and I was the lone third grader in the choir. And so I performed with those groups and did that. And at the same time, I was in elementary school choir, and I had a great conductor in elementary school. And so they kind of started me on the path. And so I didn't necessarily listen to specific performers per se, but I watched a lot of conductors, and I watched a lot of teachers, and tried to do what I could to be like them, more than anything else.
Well, you've been in the program at Roosevelt at least for 4 years now.
Yeah, yeah. This is my fourth. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have definitely made leaps and bounds from. I keep saying leaps and bounds, but you have. My oldest sister, right, went to Roosevelt before me, and she was part of the musical program for a number of years, and she would tell me stories about the older management, not necessarily the guy right before you and Mrs. Dino, but multiple years before that. And like they had like a tenth of the performances you did and like a third of the choirs. You have expanded this. You are the Roman emperor of choir at Roosevelt, dude. It is so impressive. You've doubled, tripled the size of it. You and Mrs. Dino together. It's been insane.
Well, and that's actually something that I intended to do before I was even hired, if I could be very honest there.
Yeah, that was good.
And I remember, so kind of a little bit of backstory about how I got this job. I was contacted by my conductor of the St. Olaf Choir, Dr. Anton Armstrong, someone who has been a great inspiration to me over the years. And he contacted me and said, "Hey, I think I have a job for you." And this was senior year of college. Hadn't even done my student teaching yet. And he said, come look at this job." And Ben Alloway, who is a well-known composer, international composer, his daughter Amelia Alloway graduated from Roosevelt in 2018, and then one of his older daughters, Isabel, I don't remember exactly when she graduated, but she was also a Roosevelt singer. And so Ben Alloway, he was on the boosters at the time, and they knew they were looking for a new director to take over after the that interim period between Mr. McNear and myself. They were searching, and he sent me an email, and I met with him. I met with Dr. Armstrong, and in the message that Dr. Dino sent out in the candidate that they were looking for, part of that email was a list of goals for the department and a list of possible new choirs that they wanted to add or enhance. And when I saw that list, I said, okay, this school is a place that really believes in progress and believes in change, and they are clearly ambitious if they want to add all these choirs.
Definitely.
And so I, went through the interview process, all that great stuff. And then after my first year, I met with Dr. Dino and said, hey, so about this thing here, this department, let's zhuzh it up. I don't know. Let's enhance it a little bit. And so we met, and we decided that the best thing for students, for the program, was to have more opportunities for performances, more opportunities for choirs, more chances for 9th through 12th graders to sing, but to also really grow and enhance our auditioned choirs. So much so that the chamber choir from my first year to the second year almost looked completely different, because we did fully new auditions. That group really went through a transformation these last few years. We'd only accepted a couple returning members. It was a lot of new 9th graders, a lot of talented 9th graders with great potential. And we really transformed that choir over these last few years. I never would have thought that we'd be able to, perform a mass with a chamber orchestra just in my second year, and be able to do the works that we have done, and to be able to boast a number of all-state singers and things like that. And so we were really intentional about creating these programs. And in addition to that, our treble choir that we created along with the bass clef choir have really allowed us to train singers in a really specific way. So there's so many different things that we've done. I could go on and on. I'm not going to.
You could go on and on and on. There could be a specific episode just on the number of achievements or things you've done in a short amount of time. But so that's the reason why Iowa then, the specific lining up for the job already, heading into the state and the area, because you went from Cleveland to here directly, right? From Cleveland to school to here, right?
Yeah, and there was a little blip in Connecticut at Yale University for for the summer before. So it was Cleveland, and then Minnesota, and then I went to college at St. Olaf up in Minnesota, and then after that spent 3 months at Yale teaching at one of their summer programs, and then ended up here. And I moved here specifically and only for the job. There was not a single thing about Iowa that I remotely found interesting.
Not a single thing.
Not a single thing, if I could be.
Not the fact that the pigs outnumber the people by 3 to 1. That's not interesting to you, Mr. Steve?
There's not a single thing. I knew what Iowa was. That's about it. I knew where it was. I knew that I had driven through it on a number of choir tours. Actually, my junior year of college, we did a concert at what was formerly First Christian actually around the corner from where I live, over here in Des Moines. That's now, Hope Elim.
The huge mega church, right?
Yeah, but that church, before it was Hope Des Moines, before it was that, I did a concert here, and that was my only Des Moines experience. And I don't remember it. I don't even think we stayed at a hotel in Des Moines. I think we stayed in Ames.
Right.
But yeah, so outside of the job, if I'm really being transparent, there's not a single thing, not even in the slightest, that I was interested in Iowa for.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm not going to stay here for long. And as much as we'd love to have you around teaching our program until you die, I don't think we're going to be able to keep you here long. Because you've brought up to Mr. Davenport that the last year you'd be here, you'd want to do Les Mis for. You've been quoted like 6 or 7 times saying that, which is alarming because, usually you don't talk about a teacher leaving 7 times in front of the students. But I'm going to chalk it up to your love of Les Mis specifically.
We'll do. we'll say that. No, truly, and that's a little bit what it is. It's more about Les Mis than it is about me leaving.
Right.
It's more just like, we're not going to do this big show until it's my last year.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily that I'm putting a specific timeline on it,
Mm-hmm.
because, I have goals, I have ideas. I am still fairly young. Haven't gotten my master's yet. That's, in the plans.
Right.
And so at some point I do want to further my education to continue my journey as a conductor. And while I would love to stay here forever, I know that this is going to be a really important chapter in my life, between where I was in 2017 and where I end up in 2000 whatever.
Right.
I know that this will be just a really important moment, but nonetheless will still be not the end, but kind of a thoroughfare, if you will.
Fantastic. Well, when you are conductor of the New York Philharmonic, I'll for sure to keep this as a memory. As look, I knew him before he was famous.
Right. Well, we'll see.
Right.
We'll see what happens. Though I do love orchestral choruses. I'm not going to lie. Those are I just love it. I got to sing a number of times with a lot of great choruses and orchestras, and that is definitely a goal, to be able to be the conductor of some sort of symphony chorus, which is why I was so excited to do the Home Alone thing concert a couple years ago. I was like, oh my gosh, I have my own chorus. I get to prepare this chorus with the Des Moines Symphony. I was so excited. You have no idea. I don't even like Home Alone. And if I don't I hate Home Alone. But I was so excited.
Oh, that's common.
I was
I remember that was my sophomore year, man. You were extraordinarily excited. You and Mrs. Luff were talking a ton about it.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. It was and it's still a highlight every time I get Facebook reminders about that. I'm like, oh, remember that time where we had to learn so many songs in like 2 weeks before our premiere with the orchestra.
Yeah.
But it was a good time. I've had a lot of great orchestral choral experiences, and so maybe that's a goal. I don't know. We'll see where it ends up.
Yeah, and I think that's a good goal to have. I feel like that's a good message that you portray very easily about being not goal-oriented but growth-oriented, which I feel like is very difficult to have, especially as a person that's very focused on, like, here's the choir, here's the number of concerts we have, but you're stable and able to hold on to that. I'll end up where I am excited to be, kind of thing, and that's inspiring.
Yeah, and that's new. I was not always like that. I truly, for a long time, it was just about how quickly can I do this in the best way to be the best one. And through college, that's what it was. In my conducting classes, I was like, I need to be the best one. I have to be the best one. I don't care how much I have to learn. I don't care how much I have to do. I have to be the best one. And then I got a job. And that changed my tune really fast. And that's something that I've really been working hard on, is instead of focusing on the goals, of course, still maintaining goals, having goals, setting goals.
Sure.
Those are really important benchmarks for one's own personal success. But to focus more on the growth that one can make. And that's one thing that Dr. Dino and I both talk about as professionals, but I truly have really worked hard for that. And one example of that, think about Jesus Christ Superstar, my first year that we did with the theater department. And we thought that show was amazing. We loved it. We thought it was really cool. And when we got our scores back, and they were not as high as we thought, especially because, the public really came out and showed support. And so I took every criticism that we had And I was really clear and intentional about Lion King and Adam's Family for that next year. So in Lion King, one of their critiques, well, for Jesus Christ Superstar, one of the things that I did was work on diction. But we did Lion King. That was really specific. I wanted to get the language exactly right. I wanted to be sure that everything sung was so clear, so clean. And that was something we got complimented on, was that the chorus, and specifically Bridges, really embodied that African sound in the text really well. And then the other thing that they kind of dinged us on in Jesus Christ Superstar, they liked the pit orchestra, but they said it didn't quite balance, it didn't quite work. And so for Adam's Family, I was determined to get an orchestra that really sold it, that really knew it, that could really show off the skills that they have to support the cast, and to use that to kind of connect with the singers and the performers with a really stable and a really secure orchestra. And then that ended up working out really well, as we got the award for Best Student Orchestra. I think there were only
really
two or three schools that got that award, and the fact that we got that, I mean, that I was over the moon. I looked at the other scores. I was like, okay, yeah, those are great. Yeah, great. Okay. I was just so excited about the orchestra.
Well, having seen all three, both Addams Family, Lion King, and Jesus Christ Superstar, I can say there was a distinct difference between them. It was really, really poignant.
Yeah, we all worked really hard, and Davenport and I became closer and more tight knit as a team, and worked really well together. But growth really was the thing that I had in mind, and it wasn't necessarily, oh, we have to be the best school, but it was like, we need to show them that we know how to that we know what we're doing, but we also know how to take criticism, take a feedback, and use that to teach students. And I'd be a hypocrite if I did not embody that growth mindset that I expect out of students.
That's a good insight. That is a good insight. So you grew up in Cleveland, right?
I did, against my will. No, I'm kidding.
And gospel is also the centralized, really the big one for you. That's like the impact. I know that's what you focus on, not necessarily primarily, but definitely you focus on a lot in our choirs. And so you being a gay man and also loving gospel music, was that ever a sense of tension or clash growing up in Cleveland, or was that something that was not necessarily on your plate as much as it was for others?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about kind of my relationship with gospel and just with music in general. One of the things that I have found that I'm really lucky and fortunate for is that my mother pushed classical and academic music study as much as we enjoyed going to church. So throughout high school, for example, we would go to church. I would lead the youth worship team. My dad led the adult worship team at the beginning of our church services, and we sang in the choirs, and we did all of that stuff. I played with the praise band on occasion, and all that good stuff. And then after church service, I would run downtown for the Cleveland Orchestra Youth Chorus rehearsals. So I was, so at the same time that I was growing in my passion for gospel music, I was also growing in my passion for traditional choral music and classical music, which makes me not necessarily unique, because there's a number of people that do that, obviously, but definitely not common. And that I find, especially amongst Black people in general, Black musicians. But you'll often find those that do classical music. A lot of us have had that background with gospel music and in church and singing in church. And that's kind of where we started. Everybody sings in church. That's the thing. From a young age, you join the youth choir. When you're able to join the youth choir, you do it. That's what you got to do.
That was my start too. I started singing hymns in church as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, just part of the culture, the expectation. But as I got older, and I furthered my kind of spiritual growth, I also furthered my growth in my identity of myself. And I knew I was gay forever ago, like fourth grade or something. Yeah, fourth grade, I think it seems right. I'm pretty sure my mother also knew when I was in fourth grade. Regardless, um, but being able to do gospel for a while, it didn't clash until I started to actually understand the doctrine of the Baptist denomination, and that doctrine is quite harsh towards homosexuality. And
Right.
I knew that there
Historically
had
so.
to be. Say what? I'm sorry.
Oh no, historically so. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and I knew that there had to be something. I was like, okay, there's no way, um, that I am created gay, yet have this passion for religion and spirituality and Christianity and church and stuff like and all that. I was like, there has to be something. And so I was dealing with cognitive dissonance before I even knew what cognitive dissonance was, especially as a someone so involved in the church. My family, I mean, we were so deeply entrenched in the church, and in a good way, entrenched, quite the word. But we were really involved with everything. The church services either started with my dad leading or with me leading. That was it, from the time I was in around ninth or 10th grade until my senior year of high school. We were the two. And so I was so passionate about that. And it wasn't until college that I really got to understand the doctrine a little bit more. And so at St. Olaf, we were required to take theology courses. One had to be a biblical course, and the other one had to be just general theology. And the biblical courses were all very unique. It wasn't like, this is Bible class, but it was, they had different topics. There was one that I remember that was like food in the Bible, which I thought was very interesting. There's
That
another
is
one
interesting.
that kind of talked about God as a narrative character of the Bible, called the biblical God, and I took that one. But then there was another one that has stuck with me, and that class that I took was called what was it called? Oh, Is the Bible Immoral? And that was the name of the course. And so I was so curious. I'm like, what is the answer to this question? What a grand question to ask at this very Lutheran university college. And it's just like, oh, okay. So I took that class, one of my favorite classes. And we dissected, not necessarily the Bible, but people's interpretation of the Bible. And so we had our chapters and our unit on homosexuality in the Bible. And we looked through the text and we dissected it. And it's starting to become more or less common knowledge. The terms for homosexuality was added in as a way to condemn that as a sin, like in the 20th century.
Right.
And that the original text referred to more pedophilia with a grown man and an
Right.
unconsenting boy, and so there were no concepts of or no social, I guess, dismissal of two consenting male adults, because it was just not really thought about or even covered, which is a similar thing to they talked about lesbianism a little bit in that class, and how that's barely covered, if at all. It's almost completely
Yeah, I
omitted.
think there's no reference at all to it in the New Testament.
Right.
I don't think once.
So we talked about that a lot, and that kind of calmed my cognitive dissonance that had been lasting since I was 14 years old. And I dealt with some struggles with that for a number of years. So starting when I was 14, I remember I invited my boyfriend, one of them at the time, to a church service, because I knew that he went to church and I wanted him to see. I'm like, oh, like, you should come see like my church choir. Like, we're pretty good.
Right.
We sang at this like gospel festival, which we did. It was a lot of fun. My church's youth choir, we sang at this Cleveland gospel festival. It was a really good choir. But I wanted him to come see us in church. And so I invited him to church. Didn't tell anyone that he was my boyfriend, because I was not out at the time. I
Right.
just said he was my friend, And then after after church, I hugged him, and someone saw me hug him. Um, and they were like, rumors started, and like, all the
Really?
whisperings.
Just
Um,
from that hug?
yeah. Um, and it just kind of, it wasn't great. It wasn't great, because then
Yeah.
word got around to the deacons, and then word got around to the pastor, and then they wanted, to be sure that it wasn't anything homosexual, because they didn't want me leading worship services if I was going to be behaving in that way. Um,
Right.
and so then they told my dad, and then my dad confronted me about it, and that was not a positive confrontation, between my dad and myself. And I'm not going to necessarily get into the details of that, but
Sure.
that was not great. Um, he and I did not talk for a number of months. Um, and and then after that, I spent some time like trying to convince myself, not to be gay, kind of like a self conversion therapy, and like, would force myself to like kind of like react negatively to images, or just like not nothing even inappropriate, just like, guys that I found attractive. I tried to like convince myself to, not do that, or, to make myself physically ill, if I found someone attractive.
Hmm.
Very much a Clockwork Orange type situation. When Alex is,
Right. Right.
responding
That's
to violence and things that way, it was very similar. And which was difficult because I went to an all boys school for high school. So, that,
right.
not to say, again, not to like imply that all boys schools are just rampant with homosexual people looking at everybody. But, like,
Right.
there was a higher, exposure to more male people than
Right.
I
The
would
50
have
50
had.
ratio is not 50-50. It's 100%.
Right, exactly. So, so that was difficult. So all of those things at the same time, and then one day, I just kind of gave it up. I was like, okay, I'm gay. Like, I'm just going to deal with it. But apparently, I never quite got over that, because I was still kind of resenting my church a little bit, even though I was still passionate about it, and still passionate about going to church and participating in all aspects of church life. I still kind of resented it a little bit, and didn't want to, really alert anyone to the fact that, I was gay, even though, I denied it in front of the church. Not like in front of the church. There was no like council meeting.
Sure.
Well, that I had to go to. I think there was an actual sort of like deacons meeting or something. But I, ended up having a girlfriend for some time, and she knew I was gay, and I knew I was gay, and her family knew I was gay. Kind of everybody knew I was gay. I mean, everybody and the grandma. Um, it- but but I had a girlfriend nonetheless, and I tried to do the straight thing, and it did not work. It just, and so
Right.
having to deal with all of that, while just, living life,
Right. And
and just
being a
having to,
musical genius as far as,
I mean,
leadership wise goes, having to deal with that as
uh,
well.
right, yeah, and having, just so much going on, and then being, a black gay male going to an all boys school that's mostly white people, and
Mm.
toxic masculinity was still rampant. So I'm dealing with school being, unsafe, which frankly that got much better really fast. But kind of school being not necessarily the most safe place, church not necessarily being the most safe place, me not having the best relationship with my dad for a little bit there, that was kind of fishy. So essentially, I was living in this space where, um, I didn't really have a safe place to go, and a safe place to be, all because of, me being gay and me wanting to find out who I was, while also wanting to explore my spirituality, through it all. And so those aspects together, made my cognitive dissonance become, very
Much,
real.
very real. Yeah. Would you say that you encourage people who have both, that kind of cognitive dissonance to both want to be that exploration of their identity and to be sure about things, and also to be a part of a religious community or be a part of a fellowship, would you say that that objective religious scholarship is best and that you would encourage that for everyone?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, encourage people to, find a religious connection.
Right.
Though I do think that spirituality is something that that's something that kind of goes beyond religion, that I think a lot of people can connect to, whether it's specifically to a religion, whether it's spirituality or connectivity to the earth or to the
For
universe,
sure. For sure.
things like that. I think that, a lot of people, when they have that kind of connection, it makes them a little bit more grounded in a sense. But most importantly, I wouldn't want people to be turned off from a religion because of views towards homosexuality, or in certain cases, some evangelical communities, the not condemning and white supremacy and racism,
Right.
and misogyny,
And vice
all those
versa.
aspects.
And vice versa, you shouldn't feel specifically adverted or converted to someone just because your church or religious community tells you to. It's
Right,
about
exactly.
the agency aspect of things.
Oh, for sure. Agency is such a big part. And so people, have to make that choice for themselves. And I was actually talking with a recent Roosevelt grad about religion, and he really had no idea about Christianity. He didn't really grow up being religious or spiritual in any way. And the only things that he understood about the religion was through the media of evangelical Christians. And he was like, "Oh, well, don't like all Christians just hate gay people?" I was like, "No,
Right.
what? No, absolutely not." And even my church in Des Moines, I mean, it's very, they aren't super showy about being, an affirming congregation and supporting Black Lives Matter. Not showy in that they're like embarrassed to be. I mean, they're very open about it. The pastor says it from the pulpit, Black Lives Matter, trans lives matter, gay lives matter. He's very open about that. But they're just not,
Right.
not that sort of congregation, not like a Plymouth, nothing wrong with being showy. But, we people kind of think of like, oh, Plymouth, that's the big, liberal church, so it's not quite that, but they still, support this. And so I was explaining to this Roosevelt alum that that Christianity is not just evangelical folks. I'm like, I don't act that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, some Christians will say that love is important, and loving people regardless of their orientation is kind of the point.
yeah, exactly. And I've always said that, the more and more that I learned about Christianity, I've always said, that is a social justice religion. If you're looking for something that really does give you that social justice drive, I mean, like pure love, unconditional love towards people and support of people, and doing the work to support your fellow man and fellow woman, fellow non-gender binary friend,
Right.
all of those things. That's a centerpiece of the religion, and so. If someone is dealing with religious struggles or spiritual struggles, and on the journey to find their true meaning of life, to find that connection, I would encourage them to stay on the path, because you might end up finding something that you have no idea that you needed that connection, or that you needed that community, or that you needed that spiritual experience. You don't want to give that up because a few people are giving it a bad name, because
Right. Right.
there are a number of people
There are.
for hundreds of years who do give all religions a bad name, but specifically Christianity, as it relates to the American culture and American experience,
I would definitely agree
and
with that
all
point.
of those aspects. I mean, it kind of taints it a little bit in this like patriotic Christianity that exists now, and people are
Speaking
afraid
of
of that.
Yeah, speaking of messages, if you were to get a message out to, either all your students or all budding students, both musical, non, gay, non what would you want to say as as the biggest point of advice that you've learned throughout your time as an academic?
Wow. Well, isn't that the $1 million question?
That's the kicking. It's the kicking end question. Come on, Mr. Steve.
Right. I know.
Take your time. You can think about it.
Yeah. I think no matter what, love yourself and love your journey. It's so easy to lose yourself in life, right? And especially now in this COVID world, it's so easy to lose yourself, or to want to lose yourself, or participate in activities that requires you to lose yourself and things like that. And I've seen people lose themselves so far that they now have no direction. They're just kind of going aimlessly through life, which, some people find to be fine, that they kind of just wander through and see what takes them to the next place. But those people are lost, and they're looking for guidance. And, and I wish I could save everyone. It's that hero complex that I have to deal with as a teacher. I wish I could save everyone, but I can't. And so I hope that people find that love for themselves and stay on the journey, stay on the path to find the best versions of themselves, to live in that growth, to live in that place that might be uncertain, but to know that the path forward is the path for you.
Right. I think that's really poignant. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Steve, for agreeing to be on. This has been really a pleasure talking to you. I think I've learned a lot about both music and you, and about everything. It's been great. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is so much fun.
Yeah, it's been truly a blast. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to the podcast, and feel free to tell us what your favorite part about it was, or if you'd like to have Mr. Steve on again, if I can convince him again.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, but thank you again, Mr. Steve, for coming on. Should I shout out your socials or something? No?
No. Well, they're all private, so it doesn't. But if you wanted to find me, you can send me a friend request on Facebook, or
take
find me on
Mr.
Instagram.
Steve's music classes. That's the best way you can support it.
There we go.
But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys next time.